Another patch coming up. It's that time already, isn't it? What up, ProGuides family? My name is Dan, and I'm here with another meta update for you guys. Like always, we're going to give you guys the information you'll need in order to win more of your games headed into the next patch. If you're a little bit lost about what or who's meta, don't worry, because we're going to give you guys a rundown of every role in this video. Before we start, I want to encourage you guys to check out ProGuides.com, because that's where you'll get the best preparation to win your games. We have courses, coaches, and even live classes that'll help you up your gameplay. Finally, for our question of the day, do you have any weird keybinds that you use? For the most part, I just use the default ones, but I use T for my trinket. I've seen some wild binds, like using X for an ultimate, but I want to know what you guys do and why, so let me know in the comments below, and I'm going to read through them and see if I can find something that I should try. Alright, with that all said though, let's jump into the video. Slowly but surely, more explosive mobile top laners are beginning to gain popularity over the sluggish but terrifying juggernauts. Patch 10.16 has been an incredible patch with an incredible number of changes and equally incredible shifts to the meta to top it all off. The first example of this is the surge of Jack's play. He received the buff on patch 10.16, and while we talked about him in our last episode, it's time we elaborate a bit more on him. While his play rate has only increased by about 1.5% this patch, his ban rate went up by 3%, and of course, his win rate has risen by nearly 0.5% as well. A lot of fighters, or bruisers, or whatever you want to call them, have been receiving buffs and gaining popularity in recent patches. They have what it takes to stand up to juggernauts because of their excellent mobility. While they might lose in very long fights, champions like Jax have the ability to dictate the length of trades and also tend to outscale their juggernaut counterparts because of their incredible 1v1 power, team fighting mobility, and split pushing power. There are other champions like Camille and Fiora who also boast high pick rates. Jax is not the only split-pushing bruiser to watch out for, but he's seen a massive jump in his play rate this patch. Expect to see him more often alongside others next patch. With the rise of more auto-attack reliant split pushers coming back into the meta, however, we also need to mention one pocket pick you guys should get ready. If you didn't guess it, we're here to tell you that that pick is MALPHITE. MALPHITE doesn't take much time to learn. He's simple and effective, but what you do need to spend time on is learning his matchups. Hit up some top lane friends and ask for 1v1s, or just hit up anybody you trust that can give you some good practice. You want to understand the little things about certain matchups. If you whiff your E, how hard will you get punished? How hard will you win trades when you don't hit the floor exclusively with it? These are things to take into consideration, and getting a little bit of practice should help ensure you don't make any careless mistakes. Feel free to start picking him up this patch as well. You don't need to wait until the next patch to use him as a counter pick. I love MALPHITE because his attack speed slow on E is such a powerful answer to split pushers like Jax, and at the same time, he's one of the best team fighting tanks in the game. Most tanks suffer from immobility, but with MALPHITE, you get one pretty good shot at hitting priority targets with your ultimate. When they flash out of it, or if you miss, you're out of luck. But getting a flash for an ultimate is a pretty good trade in low elo. Most players aren't able to react in time regardless. MALPHITE's ultimate is such a powerful ability and gives him a ton of carry potential in solo queue. In general, we don't see very much magic damage up in the top lane right now. Even picks like Vladimir and Rumble seem to be struggling with the recent development of the top lane meta. Akali is doing alright, and we also see Nico getting played once in a blue moon with decent success, but at the moment, you probably want to stick with the meta or counter picks to it. That's it for the top lane. Let's head into the jungle next. Alright, in the jungle, we got a new guy, HECARIM. We hyped him up last time as well, but HECARIM, and just as predicted, HECARIM is now one of the most contested picks in the jungle. He holds the highest win rate as a popular pick and sets the pace of the current jungle meta. While junglers are almost always relying on early kills and snowballing, HECARIM illustrates that the strongest picks right now spike into the mid-game. Picking up some early kills accelerates the 1 and 2 item power spikes that these junglers need to close out games as quickly as possible. HECARIM's scaling isn't even bad by any means. His damage is still insanely high, but it does get a bit harder for him to reach his targets without them escaping his charge. Good vision control and clever flanks are all that's necessary to make sure that HECARIM doesn't fall off in the late game. Yet another champion dominating the jungle right now is EVELYNN. The buffs she received this patch were just way too much. While we don't know how she'll fare in the pro scene, she's a solo queue queen right now considering how powerful her burst damage and stealth are. EVELYNN is so hard to deal with because even good vision control isn't enough to stop her from popping out of nowhere and one-shotting squishy carries. Making these picks can be devastating. They create numbers advantages for her team, and thus the preceding fights become so much easier to win. EVELYNN's ridiculous burst damage also makes her one of the scariest champions to randomly hand over a kill to. She takes a single kill, rolls with it through the entire game, and can take control of Summoner's Rift single-handedly. A lot of solo laners like to play AD champions at the moment. Like we mentioned, there aren't many AP champions that are able to survive in the top lane meta. The mid lane also has a ton of AD champions who are gaining popularity at the moment. EVELYNN is a very valuable pick because she allows these champions to be picked without losing a team the game from champion select. Mixing up damage splits is important, and EVELYNN opens up more variety for her teammates. Finally, with those two inside, NUNU is the final jungle pick we think is worth mentioning. There's a bit of variance in his builds, but you basically want to go for a little bit of AP alongside tanky items. A lot of players really value Hextech Proto Belt alongside a Deadman's Plate, as these two items provide NUNU with extra mobility as well as damage. While he's far from perfect, NUNU is reliable and can hold his weight in practically any matchup. NUNU is tanky, provides a ton of crowd control, and deals a decent amount of damage if he picks up a damage item. Ever since his AP ratios got buffed, he's been gaining a ton of popularity, and you definitely have to watch out for him on Summoner's Rift. The amount of control he provides over Dragons, Baron, and the Rift Herald makes him a very appealing pick, as these objectives swing the tide of games quite significantly. Also, like we mentioned, magic damage is very valuable in the jungle right now, and guess who else does magic damage? Finally, we want to mention that following the nerfs to Nimbus Cloak, Skirmisher's SABRE has been gaining popularity. It's not necessarily so much better that you should pick it over Stalker's Blade every game, but the difference is enough for players to really take into consideration their options. Junglers that rely heavily on dealing damage and who don't struggle with reaching their targets like Graves and HECARIM, for example, are great champions to build Skirmisher's SABRE on. They become even stronger 1v1 duelists and don't lose that much even if they give up Stalker's Blade. That's all we want to talk about in the jungle, so let's head on over to the mid lane next. With Yone joining the League of Legends champion roster, we've got yet another AD champion in the mid lane. Needless to say, the current solo queue meta for mid laners heavily favors AD champions because of their high kill pressure during the laning phase. The first champion we'll talk about for the mid lane is Zed. He's the most popular mid laner in high elo and the third most overall. He boasts high win rates alongside a ridiculously high 36% ban rate in Platinum, plus as well as a 41% ban rate across all ranks. So first, let's go over why Zed is so good right now. While these two arguments are essentially the flip side of the same coin, Zed does really well into popular mid laners, and his hard matchups aren't really that popular at the moment. Off-meta picks like Garen and MALPHITE seem to find a good deal of success against him, but most popular champions should be a skill matchup for Zed at worst. Most notable, however, is the fact that Zed does very well against the other two most popular mid lane champions at the moment. You guessed it, the brothers that most players ban anyway, Yasuo and Yone. While a champion like Zed doesn't scale as well as other champions, it's hard to pass him up because he does so well during the laning phase and early to mid game. Whether or not games are actually decided within the first 10 minutes or not, they often feel like they are. A ton of players get demoralized the moment they see their mid laner die to a Zed twice. With a winning lane matchup, Zed is able to influence the entire map with ganks and even dives. His burst damage and mobility makes going for risky turret dives quite reasonable, especially because of the tricky nature of his ultimate. So, Yone came out this patch, and you guys probably want to know how he's doing. Especially considering a champion's first patch is generally their test run. Headed into next patch, it's pretty important to know just how strong he is. Overall, Yone is quite a powerful champion. Just like his brother Yasuo, Yone doesn't rely on mana and has excellent wave clear. The longer he stays in lane, the better. Slowly, he's able to wear away at his opponent's mana bars, and at the same time, he can be quite terrifying to lane against. Yone's W is a very powerful trading tool. It allows him to deal damage while also shielding himself, and players are definitely struggling to play around it. As the game progresses, Yone proves to be an extremely potent playmaker. He's able to use his E to jump into the heat of things and attempt some plays that would otherwise require unreasonable amounts of courage. At the end of the timer, he jumps back to his starting point. Assuming he started from a safe spot, Yone can usually return to his body unharmed after going for some crazy play, and this is extremely valuable in the late game. Finally, the answer to the question you want an answer to is yes, he deals a lot of damage. Although high ban rates are typical for new champions, Yone has passed the 50% ban rate mark across all ranks, and we don't think this is going to taper off significantly even going into next patch. Like we mentioned, Zed is a strong answer to him, but you can go for an off-meta counter pick such as MALPHITE or even Pantheon as well if you're trying to avoid playing him. And of course, Yone's hot-headed brother is still very much so a meta champion. The two scale ridiculously well into the late game because they double their critical strike chance with their passives. This allows them to max out their crit chance with only 2 items, meaning they're free to choose from a huge variety of 4th, 5th, and 6th items. Yasuo's damage output is difficult to match in the late game, and let's not forget how mobile he is either. He's able to dash through foes with virtually no cooldown as long as they're different targets every time. This, alongside his high damage and wind wall, make him one of the strongest champions in the game, and even if you don't think he's that good, we heavily suggest throwing a ban at him at the very least. That's it for the mid lane, so let's head into the bottom lane next. There's only one champion we really need to talk about in the bottom lane right now, and that's CAITLYN. CAITLYN is the most contested bot lane pick at the moment, and for good reason. Her early game is hard to deal with, and her mid and late game are also very strong. Usually you'd expect an early game lane bully to fall off, but that's not really the case for CAITLYN. Although her damage output might not be as high as other champions, she can actually deal so much more under the right circumstances. Her traps are rather oppressive as she's able to block off parts of the map and force enemies to maneuver the way she wants them to. As a last resort, she also has her E, which allows her to reposition herself and also set up a free headshot if she hits an enemy with it. In high elo, CAITLYN boasts a 52.6% win rate, is the most popular champion, and also holds a 44% ban rate. From numbers alone, it's easy to tell that she's very overpowered right now. If you're finding a ton of trouble dealing with her, try hitting up one of our coaches on ProGuides.com because I know they'd love to help you out. Taking this all into consideration, we'll just talk about some answers to her. Looks like the bottom lane for now is going to look like a meta that consists of CAITLYN and whatever can survive against her if you don't ban her. In terms of marksmen, there actually aren't any that hold positive win rates against her in high elo. A few of them, however, get very close to even win rates against her, and those picks are Jhin, Ashe, and Senna. What these champions have in common are range and crowd control. One of the best ways to counter CAITLYN, or actually any champion for that matter, is to gank them. These guys have excellent setup and increase the chance of successful ganks significantly. While Jin's basic attack range is average, he has no problem farming because of the high range on his other abilities, and that includes his Q because he can bounce it off of minions. Ashe and Senna have rather high range, so they aren't as easy to poke, and Senna also has some built-in sustain anyway to help her shrug off a basic attack she eats here and there. Another pick that does decently into CAITLYN is Ziggs because his wave clear after finishing a lost chapter is pretty good. He's able to match CAITLYN's tempo, and if you're good at aiming Qs, you can even try to outplay and poke CAITLYN down. Just like CAITLYN, Ziggs also takes turrets quite quickly and is basically playing around the same game plan. The final answer to CAITLYN is to choose champions that outscale her reliably, and the most notable examples of this are SONA and Lux, who we'll talk about in the support section following up. With that said, let's wrap it all up with supports. There's a lot of talk over the SONA and Lux duo lane. These two, when put together, go from annoying to super annoying. When I say that, I mean the type of annoying when they're really good and hard to deal with. Also, Lux's laugh. If you're trying to poke SONA and Lux, you might be going at it all the wrong way. Lux's shield, as well as SONA's shield, makes short trades very disadvantageous for basically any opponent. Even if you do manage to get some damage in, SONA is able to use her W to slowly bring Lux and herself back up to a reasonable point. On top of this, their poke is really hard to deal with. SONA's passive makes any trade super free whenever it's up. She walks up, Qs, and then slaps you with a meaty basic attack, while Lux provides a safety net for her. Lux's slow from E, threatening Q, and shield from W enables SONA to play a little bit more aggressively. Pretty weird to think that an enchanter can bring out the best in another enchanter, but it makes sense since they're supports at the end of the day. Finally, this duo scales very well. Usually, SONA will build a Seraph's Embrace, which provides her a ton of AP, cooldown reduction, and basically a limitless supply of mana to draw upon. Aside from that, the builds are pretty flexible for both of them. Both SONA and Lux can focus on utility and become the greatest pick crew imaginable for their 3 other teammates, or instead build some AP and play for picks. Finally, we'll talk about Lux, but without SONA. With or without her partner in crime, Lux has emerged as a prevalent pick amongst high elo supports. She's pretty popular in low elo too, but high elo players are the ones finding the most success on her. The lingering slow on E makes it an extremely powerful ability, even if you only put 1 point into it. Lux players are generally maxing W. We all know that it shields, and we all know that it shields twice, once outgoing and once when it returns. This provides an incredible amount of value for both trading aggressively and also when on the defense. Lux provides a ton of value and utility with the combination of these two abilities and her hard lockdown with her Q. Lux's ultimate, even without an EAP, deals a decent amount of damage, especially for a support champion. Once again, Lux is proving herself to be a very potent force on Summoner's Rift and is definitely worth picking at the moment and even next patch as well. That's going to cover our 10.17 meta update. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, comment, and also subscribe so you can stay updated with all the different kinds of content we're releasing. And if you want to find me on social, you can find me at Daniel Ammerman. With all that said, I wish you guys the best of luck on Summoner's Rift, and I hope to catch you in our next video.